Hey everyone, welcome back to another monthly Maledictor update. We got some big ones in here. It's not the longest update, but what is in here is pretty good, I think. Let's jump on into it. First off, Clayton voice lines added and voice line processing. So technically, the character's voice is not in the game yet. It's not implemented, but it's recorded and it is game ready. So I just need to go in and I need to implement his voice lines into the game. And I also need to implement the other voice lines into the game as well. Reason I don't have that in yet is because I'm just waiting on some of the last of the enemy voice lines to come in. So that way I can just get all the voice lines added in all at once. So we've got the voice lines, I just need to put them in. Next, IED explosion sound distance fix. So this was an attenuation adjustment, basically. That basically just means that when you would throw the IED really far, you would detonate it, you could see it blow up, but you couldn't hear it. So the attenuation is essentially how far the sound will travel before it starts falling off. And with an explosion, that's a really loud sound that you're going to hear from very far away. So you assign that to a radius. You know, it just makes like a ball around the sound origin. And depending on how big that ball is, that's how far it will play the sound out and how long of a distance it fades out over. So that was just too small before, so I enlarged it, embiggened it, even, and so now you can hear it from farther away, and it sounds a lot better now. Next, more sprites. The tradition continues. Got a lot of variety with these sprites in, so that's kind of a running theme with this update is just variety. Next, fixed a blood sprite. Speaking of sprites. So the blood sprite issue was just from some pools of blood on the ground. They would have this really hard line just cutting right through them on the edge. And that was essentially just because of sometimes when I paint these sprites out in Photoshop, not all of the pixels in them will be completely opaque. So usually, you know, I can see them when they're towards the edge or whatever and erase them out so that we don't get any part of the sprite going over the canvas edge. And usually when I put them into Unreal, it will look at the transparency of the pixels when I go to mask it, and it will kind of like cut off or cut out those really transparent pixels, so I don't really have to worry about it that much. But sometimes what can happen is Unreal will decide to keep some of those pixels, and then you wind up with a hard edge where you can see the end of the canvas. So I just had to go in and I had to erase out those edge pixels that were a little too opaque. So now you can't see the edge, so it doesn't have that hard line running through it. And then speaking of blood, added blood spray effect. Go into our AI test here. You can see that when you get shot, now some bullets will cause a little blood spray to go like shooting out of them. And that's pretty much just kind of two purposes really. The main one is in dark areas, it can be really hard to see the blood impact sometimes. So sometimes it can be a little hard to tell if you're hitting somebody. Like if you have a gun with a lot more spread, like the submachine gun, it might be a little hard to tell if you're impacting or not. That way, that just gives you a little bit more visual confirmation that you're hitting. And then the other benefit is that it just looks better. It is a lot more interesting and helps the game feel a lot more interactive, and you know, like makes it feel more impactful. So yeah, so I like that little effect. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. And we've got a small HUD improvement. if we look at the HUD, you probably have not memorized the HUD enough to really notice the change, but basically the little dark rectangles at the bottom of the HUD, that's pretty much what I added in. Just adding a little bit more contrast and a little bit more visual interest into the HUD so that, you know, it looks better, but also so you can see the icons a little bit better. Before, they kind of not necessarily blended in, but they weren't as easily noticeable as before, or as they are now. So that's nice. I also played around with adding some more design elements onto the HUD, but I basically undid it because every bit of extra design work that you put onto the HUD means that that's covering up more of the screen. And so it can get excessive pretty quick. So I've always tended more towards minimalistic HUDs whenever I have the chance for it. So yeah, I'm still not 100% happy with the HUD. I'll probably mess around with it more as we go on later, but for now it's an improvement. Next, finished E1M7 for real this time. The E1M7 before just had this big drop off right here, and because I didn't have E1M8 done. So now that I've got E1M8 done, I went back in and was able to add the end of the level into E1M7. So turn on the lights, then I think it looks pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. It also looks a lot darker here in the preview because our character in the game will he essentially like emits light, like a little flashlight effect. So everything's a little bit more bright when you get into the actual game. So it looks a little dark here, but in game it brightens up a bit. Next, the last arcade game was added. Got a little spoiler for that at the start of the video, right here. So yes, the last arcade game. That's for the radio shows. I want to do a new radio show for every level, but there's only a certain amount of arcade games that you can put in that before you start repeating yourself. And also because of the control scheme that I work with, most games, when they have little mini games like an arcade game in it, they'll, you know, fix your camera onto the arcade game and they'll take over your controls so that then your controls control the arcade game. And so you can't move around while you're playing it. I kind of, for this game, I think for this style of game, I much prefer directly controlling things with your character, which is why all of them involve you having to press the buttons on the cabinet to make things happen. I think it feels a lot more appropriate for this style of game, but that also limits the amount of games that you can put in, because, you know, certain games just don't really work that well when you're having to, you know, quickly jump between buttons and pressing them in game, and you're having to move your camera around, so you're taking your focus off of the game itself. So so yeah, these 7 games that I've got, because there's no arcade game on the boss level, the 7 arcade games that I have, I'm happy with them, and I think that they're fun and have some good variety in there. And so those ones are going to be repeated in episode 2 and 3, and so we'll be done with arcade games here. But you know, I am happy with what we've got. And for this arcade game right here, the idea for it is pretty simple. If you've got the different sized buckets that are worth different points. The big ones are worth a little bit less than the small ones. You get a time bonus depending on how much leftover time you have. You get 15 or more balls in the buckets. Then you move on to the next stage, which adds a multiplier onto your score and also speeds up the the table. So that makes it to where you are able to infinitely play the game as long as you keep going. But because there's kind of a limit to how fast you can make that, essentially have it so that you will go from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. In stage 3 you have maximum multiplier and it moves pretty fast. And then once you beat stage 3, it resets back to stage 1, resets the speed, resets the multiplier. So you're kind of going in these sets of 3 stages, but it won't end until you get less than 15 balls in the bucket, or until you run out of time. So that way, it's a fun challenge. I think that the time bonus and the different sized buckets add a lot more depth into the game than its real life counterpart. So I'm very happy with how it's turned out. It is it was a very easy one to code, which was very nice on my side. But I think that it is also a very fun one. So I'm very happy with leaving it with this, having this be the last arcade game that I made. So next, E1M1 visual improvements and fixed broken E1M1 UVs. They're kind of all, these next ones are all kind of together. And then more models, that's involved with the visual improvements. And then visual improvements for E1M2, E1M3, and E1M4. So that's adding a lot more variety into the maps, adding more pickups for you to get, making new models, making new sprites, so getting some more visual updates and just making it look more interesting, filling out the levels a bit more. And then in the case of E1M1, fixing broken UVs, which I think I also fixed some in the other levels too. Maybe not encouraging to hear that, but better to fix them than, I guess, have them and not notice them. And so by broken UVs, I can actually give you a little bit of a demonstration of what I mean. So if we get our brick texture here, make a block like that, put one in the center, and then do something like this. Like we want to make a ramp, and even make a few ramps here. I kind of want to guarantee that it'll happen. This weirdness will happen so that you can see what I'm talking about. And so the reason I'm putting in ramps specifically is that it seems like it happens with ramps a lot. Okay. So we make like this weird little structure here. And then we go to auto UV it so that the brick will tile correctly. Object. So that we are now scaling the texture correctly. Go in, and there you go. Those are the broken UVs I'm talking about. So you can see like this kind of weirdness that happens. And it happens a lot with ramps. I'm not really sure why. Probably just goes to show my inexperience. So generally, I'm very careful when I put in ramps now, because you wind up with things like this. And it's more of an issue when you really don't know what you're doing with modeling and you do some things that I would definitely not do now, but I didn't know that I shouldn't do when I was starting off. So E1M1 has had quite a few instances like this. And so I was basically just going in and fixing, like just looking for any instance of this and fixing it. So E1M1 had a lot of that. And fortunately now, it does not. So, yeah, it's good to get that fixed because that will take your immersion and kind of just break it over your knee pretty quick. So happy to get those fixed whenever I find them. Next, bodies now, Jim. So this is kind of these next three all kind of happen at the same time. Going to our AI testing map here. So we've got in the game, we've got these civilian bodies, but then we also have just regular bodies from enemies here. And I just also want to bring up the enemy lighting change here. You can see how they get a little bit brighter as we go towards them. Originally, when you would get up next to them, they would pretty much glow. Like, they were way too bright before. And so I, to try to fix that, switched them over to a different lighting channel so that they would essentially just not interact really with light at all. And that looked all right, but it wound up having the issue of they would look different from other sprites, and I didn't really like that. So I went in and I started kind of fixing them. I found a nice medium between them, so that now they interact with light a little bit, but not anywhere near as much as they did before. So they look a lot better. So got these bodies, and now you can jib them. And that can happen from either them taking a whole bunch of damage all at once, or just from taking an accumulation of it. So now, it just makes things a little bit more fun, and makes things feel a little bit more interactive. And then added new jibbed bodies. You can see when you blow them up, you got some leftovers afterwards. And we used to only have this sprite here, but now I added this one and this one, so we've got some extras. I want to add some more, and I definitely want to work more on the jibbing system overall, but you know, it's a big improvement. So it's like I've said before that, you know, the blood effects in this style of game, very important. So we want to make sure that, you know, it feels good to fight people and everything. It feels satisfying. So there's that, and then I also, you know, fortunately have a lot of ideas for things to do. I'm very, very lucky in that a lot of mods like, you know, Brutal Doom exist to give lots of inspiration for this sort of thing. So, yeah, you know, we've come a long way from just, you know, somebody blowing up, but there's still a lot more that I want to do that will make it a lot more fun and interactive. So, and you know, you can impress your loved ones when they see you playing your game and see you blowing apart dead bodies all over the place. They definitely won't think you're a psycho at all. Anyway, so that's it for this update. Coming up, I wanted to touch up the other levels. You know, you want them 5, 6, 7, and 8. Even the recent levels can still get touch-ups because, you know, it's good to come back to a level when you're not having to worry about its design. You know, when its design and layout is all set in stone and set up and settled, then you can come in and be a little bit more creative with things like sprites and models and some texture variation. And so it'll be good to go back to the more recent levels as well. So I want to touch up the levels. I need to implement the voices. And then once that is done, basically going to do another alpha build, get that tested, fix whatever bugs come out of that, and then I am really kind of like really setting my sights on July for getting the game purchasable on Steam in early access anyway for episode 1. So it's getting there. I also need to do things like implement things like Steam achievements, and that should, fortunately, I think, be pretty easy. There's a lot of plugins for that sort of thing. I would have no idea where to start with that, but apparently it's not that hard, and people have released plugins for people like me who don't know much about anything regarding interacting with APIs. So, it's a simple, from what I understand, it's a simple process that's made even simpler. So hopefully that shouldn't be too difficult. And then we'll get that put up onto Steam, and it'll be purchasable probably in July. So we are in May, so 2 months to really finalize this. Say finalize, it's going into early access, so it won't be too final, but it should be, I think it should have an appropriate level of polish that should inspire a little bit of confidence. So we'll be getting there, but we'll go over however much closer we are towards it next month in the next update. That is it for now, so I will see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. You guys have a good one.